Hi, thanks for having me on.
Yes. All right. This is actually going to be, a live interview with our young author, Ben Kushner. We will be knowing his writing journey, a moment from now. And then at the same time, he'll be talking about his work. Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome Ben Kushner. Okay,
Thank you
thank you
so
so
much for
much
having me
for the
on.
invitation. Yes, I'm also very honored to have you here. All
Thank
right,
you.
so are you ready for our book talk?
Of course I am.
We are actually going to have 10 questions here, which I prepared for you. And I'm very much excited to know of your answers here.
All right, sounds good.
Okay. Okay, I hope you're just doing fine there, even if it's already 10:30 p.m. there in your country.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
doing fine.
hmm
This is
hmm
regular young person. I always stay up this late. It's fine.
Yes, yes. That's why I appreciate that you were able to adjust your time just to fit in my schedule.
Uh-huh. Yeah, of course.
Now, are you ready to start our conversation or our book talk?
Very ready.
Now, let's get the ball rolling. By the way, on top of the live session that we'll have, I'm also going to upload the video in my booktube channel, Clark the Bookworm. Yes. Or I changed already the name of my channel. It's gonna be Clark Kent. Okay?
All
And
right.
also in my book talk. All right. Now, let's have the first question I prepared for you. Okay. When did you first realize you wanted to be a writer?
Well, so when I was young, I was
Mhm,
always a reader. I remember the moment, the book that really first hit me and showed me
mhm,
the power that words and language have to,
mhm,
as I say on my podcast, enchant, delight, inspire.
mhm,
That's sort of the tagline of my podcast. And the first book for me that really did that was Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone or Philosopher's Stone, depending on where you are.
mhm,
And so it was at that point, which I read when I was 5 years old,
mhm,
that I realized the power that words had, but I didn't think I realized yet that I had the power to do that, that I had the
mhm,
ability to use my words to create an emotional effect in other people. And
mhm,
so it took me a little bit, and I think it was around fifth grade that I read my first book written by David Baldacci, who's my current
mhm,
favorite author and someone who I try to sort of model myself on in terms of my writing. And
mhm,
I realized, and because of just like a slightly different style and the obviously very different genre from the fantasy, I think that I sort of realized, okay, well, maybe I can do that. And so that was about the
mhm,
time that I realized that that was a possibility.
mhm,
And then once I started writing Shattered Lion, which was a couple years later down the line, I remember there was a certain point. It was when I hit the 50-page mark. I'd written 50 pages on the Google Doc. And I was like, oh, yeah, I really can do this. And that was the moment that I realized writing is for me. That's the path that I'm going to take. And that was when I
mhm,
realized that I was going to get to the end of this duology no matter what.
So basically, the book that you've written is a duology.
Yeah, so it's a you could either say that it's a large book or that it's
Mhm,
two separate books within the same duology.
mhm.
Here, I'm just going to show them on screen because I have them right
Yeah,
in front of
sure.
me. So we've got
All
Shattered
right.
Lion Volume 1 right
Mhm,
here. And that is, and then the direct continuation of that. So basically, the
mhm,
moment that Shattered Lion Volume 1 ends, Shattered Lion Volume 2
mhm.
begins. And
Well,
so
that's a really
it's,
large book.
yeah, so it's a, I guess a duology would probably be the best description of it.
So, by the answers you have given me a moment ago, I presume that you love genre which are, sort of mystery, also fantasy because you love Harry Potter, right?
Uh-huh. I like so many different genres.
Mhm,
I think that that's one of the issues with a lot of writers and
mhm,
also sometimes a lot of readers is you sort of pigeonhole yourself into a single genre. And
mhm,
I love reading history, I love reading
mhm,
historical fiction, I love reading
mhm,
mysteries, thrillers, fantasy, and
mhm,
everything in between. And I really think that as a writer, that helps me because I can take some of the elements of fantasy. For example, fantasy is known for having really good imagery and descriptions and stuff like that. I can incorporate that into my thriller writing. I can incorporate the sort of weaving of facts into a narrative in the same way that a historical fiction writer does. So I think that by having a broad reading range, not only does that make me like a better rounded person and hopefully more interesting to talk to, but it also makes me a lot better of a writer.
All right, that's great to know that. Now, how long does it take to write a book?
So I'm not sure how much the people who are watching know about this, but there's different types of writers out there, and we have different terminology within the community to use it. So there's plotters, which like plan everything out. There's pantsters, which sort of just fly by the seat of their pants and just like write whenever they have inspiration. There's plansters, which are somewhere in between. I definitely consider myself more of a pantster. So I write whenever there's inspiration. So Shattered Lion Volume 1 took me several years to write. I started in 7th grade. I think I finished in the beginning of 9th grade. So that's about 2.5, 3 years almost. And then Shattered Lion Volume 2, I wrote from about 9th to 10th grade, but then I also took part of this year out to rewrite the last 80 pages. I literally just deleted them and rewrote them, something that was absolutely terrifying and heart-wrenching for me. So I think that it really depends. I think that on average for like a 300-ish page book, I would say that it would take about a year or two, just because I'm not that prolific. I'm not cranking out words like Stephen King. Because I'm also like a full-time student. I'm trying to write I'm trying to run my podcast and things like that. So I can't really be writing as my only thing that I'm doing.
I know a lot of authors who write books in 10 years. 10 years time. No. Yeah. In fact, one of the favorite authors I have here, Victoria Schwab, wrote her book for 10 years. That was actually An Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. But in her case, yes, that's normal that you'd be able to complete the book in 1 to 2 years. Although I agree with you that there are some authors who write books very fast. Like in a year, they would be able to write 3 books. Imagine that.
Yeah, and
it's really superb, writing skill. I really admire those writers.
It's absolutely crazy to me that they have the ability to do that.
Next question I prepared for you is quite interesting.
Sorry, continue.
Sorry. Now, the next question here is this. What is your interesting writing quirk?
My interesting writing quirk. Oh gosh, I wish that I had one. I really I feel like a lot of writers do interesting things. I know a lot of writers who like basically plan out their entire lives on like Pinterest boards. The writing community and the Pinterest community are super interrelated. I'm not into that. I guess one thing that could be considered a quirk is that I can't write if I don't have tea. I drink there's this type of tea from a company called Celestial Seasonings called Tension Tamer. And when I was doing my rewrite of the last 80 pages of Shattered Lion Volume 2, I think I went through like 5 or 6 cups of Tension Tamer tea every single day that I was writing. And so I guess that could be considered a quirk. I don't know.
Yeah, the power of tea in your writing career. All right. In my case, for example, I can't read if I don't drink coffee. But in your case, you can't write without a tea.
Yeah.
That's really an interesting fact about you as a writer. Okay. How do you publish your books? Because I've read a moment ago that you have your own publishing, shall I say company? How do you publish your book?
Yeah. So I publish my books on my own personal website, bensbookshack.com. It is it has the full e-commerce there. You can buy the ebook, which is $6 for each ebook, volume 1 and volume 2, and then print copies are $13.50. And that really just lets me avoid going through the whole Amazon, Barnes and Noble thing, because, first off, those companies are not always 100% ethical. And so it's
Correct.
better to
I
sort
agree.
of, I know that I'm not like exploiting any workers or anything like that. So it feels a little better psychologically to go through the publishing process by just by being able to just directly give the information to people and directly give the books to people. But it also is helpful in terms of the profit margin. And I think that this is, something that I feel like a lot of people don't talk about in public, like on podcasts or YouTube channels or things like that. But I think that it is important because if you're a reader, what you want to do is support the author. So even though I do have my books as ebooks on the majority of like the quote unquote like legitimate publishing companies like Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kobo, that kind of thing, it's for the same price as you would get it off my website. So if you're getting it off my website, instead of having $3.57 of the $6 going to Jeff Bezos, all of the $6 are going to support me as an author. So I think that it's a nice way to do it. I feel like it's beneficial to people all around. So that's the method that I chose to publish.
Yeah, I believe that sometimes there are certain predicaments if you're going to publish your work in certain publishing companies. Okay, and now speaking of that, what are the advantages of publishing your work? Yes, your own
Well,
work.
I think that, especially as a younger writer, as someone who's 18, you feel a lot of imposter syndrome. You feel like, am I worth it? Am I telling this story right? Is this story worth being told? And honestly, I would love to tell everyone that the answer to that question is just yes, your work is always worth it. Your story is always worth being told. But, that's not always the case. Some things are better written than others. Some things are more likely to connect with readers and more likely to create the emotional reaction that you're looking for than other things are. And so you really don't know whether or not you're successful. You really don't know, what to work on. You don't know those things until you just get it out there. And that's really advice that I needed to hear. I was for such a long time sort of caught up in this idea of traditional publishing, of getting the agent and then getting a big 5 publisher, ending up becoming a multi-millionaire who's able to do anything that he wants with his money and with the books because everyone just wants to buy it. But that's not always feasible. And if you are able to sort of abandon the idealism and just say, I want to get this out there. I know that I told a story that's worth being told. I know that this book is going to be able to enchant, delight, inspire. I know that it's going to be able to make your heart race. And you're going to either love or hate the characters depending on how I was able to create them. You're going to love the relationship between Sophie and Jan in Shattered Lion. You're going to hate Ivanov and you're going to love to hate him as the main villain. If you know that in your heart as a writer, if you've poured your time and soul and money into this book, then just get it out there. People want to read it. People want to support you. People want to read that book because of what you've invested in it. So that's what I think the advantage is it's affirming to you as a writer. It tells you that you are worth it, that your writing is worth it. And it also helps you learn about things like, what can I do better? How can I market? What kind of people like to read it? And so there's a ton of advantages to getting it out there. So if there are any like writers who are listening to this, not just readers, get your work out there, share it with the world. It deserves it. People are going to want to read it, and you're going to have the power to enchant, delight, and inspire.
You already are stirring me interest to read your book, Shattered Lion. I was interested. I'm very much interested to read more about it. You've given us, the bird's eye view of what your books are all about. And now, speaking of your books, could you tell me your inspirations in writing Shattered Lions?
So, as I said earlier, I think that as a younger writer, you're influenced a lot by what you read. And as I also said earlier, I've always been someone that's been interested in a lot of genres, from dystopians to historical fiction to thrillers like Shattered Lion. And as a young kid, as a 7th grader, when I first started writing this, I had so many different obsessions. And I was like, I want to be able to create characters like this person. I want to create storylines like this person. I want to create intrigue like this person. And so I took a lot of elements of the things that I enjoyed reading at the time, and I sort of put them together in a melting pot to sort of see what I was going to come up with. And then using those different stylistic elements from people like David Baldacci, Brent Weeks, Ken Follett, Brandon Sanderson, I was able to create. I noticed that that's one of the things in the giveaway, but I decided that I could sort of keep the take those different elements, stir them together into a melting pot, and come up with my own unique style. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm like stealing from these writers. I'm not plagiarizing. The book is entirely my own, but sort of these different feelings, these different techniques that they used that made me react in different ways, that made me either fall in love with one character, hate them, that made me, you know, just like clench up in fear, like, oh my God, what is going to happen? I was able to very clearly see how the authors were doing that and then incorporate that into my style. So I think in terms of inspiration for Shattered Lion, it was less inspiration in terms of like, what is the plot? What is going to happen? A, B, C, D. And more inspiration of like the tone and the feelings and the styles and sort of just more of the reaction that I wanted to elicit. As I said, I'm a pantster, so I just sort of write by the seat of my pants. So the story wasn't really something that I planned out from the beginning. It just sort of flowed for me eventually when I started writing it. You know, the characters start talking to you. You start knowing what's going to happen next. You realize, oh, I need this character to be in this place. And it makes sense to have him talk to her in order, you know, all of that kind of stuff. That just sort of flowed naturally. I didn't have that planned out. I didn't really have a clear inspiration for that.
I agree with you that, you know, you can just draw inspiration from other books. You don't really copy. You know, in fact, this is common in some authors to have inspiration in some, you know, in some writers or from some writers, shall I say. You mentioned about Brent Weeks and, of course, Brandon Sanderson. We would really be friends because those are, you know, my favorite authors, my high fantasy authors.
Although the interesting thing is that the book that brought me into the Brandon Sanderson fandom was not actually high fantasy. It was Steelheart, which I would consider to be more dystopian. And it was that that series that really you can see through the pages of Shattered Lion a lot more than Mistborn or any of his other books.
Mistborn. Okay, so you read Mistborn and Starlight Archive, I suppose.
Yes.
Great. Okay. I actually would like to acknowledge the presence of hello, Mark Reynolds. Thank you so much for supporting me here, and also Mathia. Okay. If you have your questions, feel free to drop it in the comment section. You know, we'll be very much happy to talk about that one. Or our guests will be very much happy to answer the questions. All right. Hello, Mark. How are you? And Mathia, if you're here. Okay, now we're down to the next question. What do you like to do when you're not writing?
Well, I'm someone who's just all over the place. I have interests everywhere. I have been trained as a classical violist, so I do play a lot of my instrument. I am a big fan of what we call in the US soccer, what you guys call football everywhere else in the world. So I'm a big fan of this team Bayern Munich from Germany. Don't ask me why that happened. I just sort of ended up choosing a team and became a fan of them. I enjoy playing soccer. I play for a travel team in my area. I sing with a local group called the Washington Revels, which does cultural folk singing and dancing and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I'm sort of just all over the place. I really enjoy outdoors things. I recently actually became an Eagle Scout from Boy Scouts of America. So, yeah, my interests are all over the place when I'm not writing.
You also have your regular reading schedule.
Yes, my regular reading schedule, which is just as chaotic as my writing schedule. I'll
Why?
read like 3 books in 4 days, and then I won't read anything for like a month, and then
Ah.
I'll read again. I go on sort of these binges.
Uh-huh. So you have your reading pattern and your writing pattern as well.
Uh-huh. And actually, I want to mention something. This is just a shout out. I'm not like affiliated with this book in any way, but the most recent book
Sure.
that I actually read was took place primarily in the Philippines, so it might be of interest to your audience. It's called
Wow.
100 Silent Ways by Mari Joji. I
Mm-hmm.
reviewed it. I
Mari
reviewed it
Joji.
on Yeah, she's a debut author. She's Filipino American.
Okay, could you send me her name so I could research more about her
Yeah,
later on?
but I
Okay.
reviewed the book on the most recent episode of my podcast, the Ben's Book Shack
Uh-huh.
podcast. I just wanted to give it a shout out because that was the most recent book I read, and I thought it was really good. So people in
Mm-hmm.
your audience might be interested.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yes. Especially that she's a Filipina, I would really support her work. Support local, as some of us here actually would tell. By the way, before we proceed to the next question, I actually have some book giveaways. So to those of you who are watching, our book talk with Ben Kushner, this is, the thing that you'll have to do to qualify for the next round. Because just last night in my Facebook, uh, I told you to share my post, and that's already the first step. The second step in the process is this. I'd like you to ask, interesting question with Ben Kushner. Yes. If you ask interesting questions other than what I already asked, then you qualify for the next round. All right. Hello, John. John Lloyd Canlas. Thanks for watching. Yes. You can actually just drop your question here in the comment section. Yes. And as soon as you do so, we're going to stop momentarily and Ben Kushner is going to answer your question. Okay. Now, all right. Let's wait for that. Let's give them like about 1 minute.
All right, sounds good.
So how are you doing so far? With this interview that we have, it's already about 20 minutes.
Yeah, I'm doing well.
Uh-huh.
As someone who interviews authors regularly on my own podcast,
Mm-hmm.
you're a really good interviewer. I really enjoy talking to you.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, by the way, to those of you who are joining, the book prices, which I'm going to give away, are the books of Brandon Sanderson. I have an extra copy of Skyward. Also, Patrick Ness, Monster of Man, and of course, by Naomi. What was the book? It was The Power. Yes, I'm gonna give away those books. Yes, to whoever is going to be the winner for today's, event, shall I say? All right, maybe they are still composing their questions. Okay, and
Okay.
we better have the next question here.
All right.
I prepared for you. What was the most surprising thing you learned in creating a book?
I'd say probably the most surprising thing is
Mm-hmm.
how much you fall in love with your own characters. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really expecting that. I was expecting them as I was expecting my characters to be more tools through which I could manipulate the plot and the different events that were happening than I was for them to be like my friends. But you spend so much time writing these characters
Mm-hmm.
that I really think that the best metaphor for it is you fall in love. You know what their likes are, what your dislikes are, and when you have to, do something, hurt them or something like that, you feel bad. I remember there were several times that I cried because I just felt
Mm-hmm.
so bad for doing something to these fictional characters, and
Mm-hmm.
so I feel like that's just surprising. You just get this deep connection with these people who are just a manifestation of a part of you. They're a
Mm-hmm.
manifestation of something in your brain, some part of yourself and your identity that you haven't quite acknowledged yet. And you
Mm-hmm.
become in tune with that. You become in tune with that through them. And
Mm-hmm.
that sort of connection that you have with these fictional characters is just absolutely incredible. And it's something that you just don't think of when you're first starting the writing process.
Mm-hmm. So that means, do you see yourself in a character that you have made?
I do see myself. And it's interesting because, of course, their lives are totally different. I've never been a
Mm-hmm.
professional Dutch soccer player whose sister was kidnapped by the vice president of the United States. That has never happened to me,
Mm-hmm.
nor do I nor do I ever think that it will happen to me. But I had but some of his insecurities, some of his feelings about certain issues, those all came from me. Same with characters like Sophie and Megan, and some of their problems, some of their things that they deal with throughout the books are things that I've dealt with on a smaller scale. And I think that writers do that a lot, where we take our own personal experiences that are on a small scale and we greatly expand them to a larger scale. So if, for example, if we're feeling some sort of listlessness in our writing, like we don't really know where we're going, you take that smaller problem, that smaller personal problem, and you expand that, and you make your character be literally lost in the wilds of Siberia. You take that feeling that you feel and you can translate that feeling to your character, but in such a larger setting that has larger stakes and a higher impact. And so I feel like I did that a lot, where I took the feelings that I was feeling at the time, I translated that into the character, and I expanded it to make it as big and as crazy and as impactful as it could have been on these characters' lives.
Yeah, I'm very glad to know that. Do you hear from your readers much? If so, what kind of things do they tell you?
I do hear from my readers, not as much as I would like to. So if you do end up reading Shattered Lion Volume 2 or Volume 1, if you end up reading that, anyone that's watching, reach out to me, tell me what you think. I love hearing from people. I think that the people that I generally hear the most from are the people who are like sort of in my inner circle who have read the book. So people who I either know from school or who I know from other things, who have taken the time to read it. And I think that a lot of the feedback is just, I think because I was younger when I wrote it than I even am now, I think there's a lot of feedback of, oh, I think it's so incredible that you were able to write this at such a young age. But I think that people also give a lot of like actual feedback, like, but I think that, this character could have been done a little differently. I think that people are very open in giving constructive criticism, especially to people who are younger, who are trying to expand our creative ability. And I really appreciate that, because I'm still growing as a writer. I am obviously very proud of Shattered Lion and what I was able to do with that. I think that it's worthy of being out there on the book market. I think it's worthy of being read. I think it deserves a place on every single person's bookshelf. But also, I know that I still have room to grow as a writer. This is not going to be my last book. I certainly hope it won't. I hope that I'm going to publish 20, 30 books down the line. And so giving constructive feedback and that kind of thing is always really helpful. But also just reach out and say, oh, I liked it. I really thought that this character was incredible. I don't want to spoil anything, but at the end of Volume 1, I kill a character who's very important to the plot. And
oh my God.
I had a lot of people reach out to me who are quite upset that I killed this character. They were like, "Oh my God, how dare you?" They were one of the the major characters, and they're just gone now. And I'm like, yeah.
That's one of my reading quirks. Now, each time the author actually killed my favorite character, I actually would shout out loud. Well, anyway, I agree with what you've said a moment ago, that yes, constructive criticism actually really helps you as a writer. Yes. For as long as it's done in a good way, then there's no problem with that one.
Yeah.
Rest assured that I'm going to read your work one of these days. I'd be purchasing that one, and we will talk about this one. We're now friends on Facebook, and I can ask you, questions. Or okay, I will find out who that characters you killed. Okay. Anyway, what do you think makes a good story?
I think that.
Hello, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? So what I think.
Hello. Okay, again, I'll
Okay.
repeat my question. What do you think makes a good story?
I think that what makes a good story is focus. I think that my main problem that I see when I'm reviewing books or when I'm reading books is that they
Hello?
just don't. Hello, sorry, can you hear me? Clark? Can you hear me?
Mm.
You can? Am I good? All right.
Hello?
Sorry.
Okay, all right. There it is. We're back.
All right, sounds
Uh-huh.
good.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So, your
Now,
question was what makes a good story? And I
yes,
think that the
yes.
most important thing that makes a good story is focus. I think that a book
Mm-hmm.
or a story needs to have a clear effect that the author wants to get from the reader, and that you need to
Mm-hmm.
have a story that is streamlined in a way that will get that effect. So, if your goal is to make someone cry or make someone swoon or make someone tense up in fear, then you need to make sure that you're writing a book that is focused towards creating that effect. And I think that that's something that we do in, regular storytelling when we're just talking verbally, is we say, is if you want to tell a funny story, then you tell it in a way that is humorous. You tell it in a focused way. You're focused towards that punchline. And
All right.
all right, did you hear what I
Okay.
was saying?
Yes, yes, I heard that. Although just a moment ago there was an interruption. There's a question here raised by one of our audiences. Okay, I hope you'd be very happy to answer this question. What
Uh-huh.
advice do you have for aspiring authors? This one is a question by John Lloyd Canlas Dizon. He wanted to be a writer in the future. Yes. What advice would you give her or him?
I would give the advice of like actually write. I think that a
Mhm,
lot of people have the desire to write. They have that feeling inside of them that they have a story that they need to tell, but then they open up that blank document and they can't actually get any words onto the paper. And it's like, come on, man, just write. Like it is worth it. You know,
mhm,
even if you just manage to have an effect on one person, just write it, because
mhm,
when you get through that, as I said earlier, is like the first 50 pages was sort of when I realized
mhm,
that I could do this. You're going to
mhm,
get to that point when you realize, oh, I can do this. I have the capacity. I have the storytelling ability. I have the time management skills to write the book, and then it'll come together. You'll write it. Your first draft will be awful. I promise you, your
mhm,
first draft, no one will want to read it. But then you're going to
mhm,
improve it. You're going to self edit. It's going to get better. Then you're going to send it off to beta readers, and it's going to get better. You're going to send it
mhm,
off to your editor, and it's going to get better, and it's going to get better, and it's going to get better until finally you have, your book in your hands, and you're finally
mhm,
like, this is something that I can share with the world. This is a
mhm,
manifestation of me. This is my story. This is the
mhm.
story I wanted to tell. And, just write it. That's always the first step. Everything else will work out in some way, shape, form, or fashion. Just write.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you so much for that advice. Yes, in fact, that question is also the question I would like to ask. Okay, because I have this what we call wildest dream to be an author someday. I wish I could reach that dream. Okay,
I'm sure that you
and
can.
Uh-huh. Okay, by the way, there's this someone who sent me a private message. She would like to ask you a question. Is there any, I mean, was there any, time you would like to give up writing a book?
Oh,
Was there a
there
time?
have been
Mm-hmm.
there have been tons of times that I felt
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my gosh, I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, After Shattered Lion Volume 1 was published, there were
Mm-hmm.
moments that I wasn't sure if that I wanted to publish Shattered Lion Volume 2. There were
Mm-hmm.
moments that I didn't think that it was worth it.
Mm-hmm.
There were entire stretches. This was mostly when I was working on Volume 1, where I
Mm-hmm.
didn't write for like months on end because I decided this wasn't worth it. I'm just going to give
Mm-hmm.
up. I'm going to put this in the corner. It'll just be
Mm-hmm.
in my computer. And, I'll just remember, haha, remember that time that you tried to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
But every single time I came back to it, I
Mm-hmm.
remembered, I remembered why I was writing. I remembered the story that I wanted to tell. I remembered that deep connection that I had with the characters and how joyful I felt when I was writing them, how joyous I felt at their joy and how sad I felt at their sadness. And, if you can fall in love with the characters, if you can write a story that you believe in, even if you do end up taking a break, even if you do end up, deciding that you want to step back for a little while, maybe work on something of another genre or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, you're going to come back. If you've written the story that you want to write, you're going to come back because
Mm-hmm.
that doubt will one day disappear when it comes to the power of characters and the power of storytelling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much, Sir Rian, for watching. Best regards, Sir Rian. Okay, send also my regards or my warm, my warm hugs to our friends. Yes. Okay. So how did you manage the situation?
Sorry, which situation?
Yes, yes, when you were about to give up writing a book.
Um, well, I think that a lot of the time
Mhm.
distance was helpful for me. I
Mhm.
think that if you are writing something and you want to give up,
Mhm.
then it might be a good idea to take a step back, take a couple
Mhm.
weeks off from writing, or maybe even a couple months off.
Mhm.
Because if you feel like you want to give up, then there's like a couple things that are probably gnawing away at you. Either one,
Mhm.
you don't actually like the story that you're writing.
Mhm.
And so if you don't like the story that you're writing, then you should take a step back and rethink it because you need to
Mhm.
love your own story in order to make it be good.
Mhm.
If the problem is that you're having, problems outside of your writing, sometimes you want to give up because it feels like an extra task. It feels like
Yes.
something that you have to do instead of something that you want to do, something that you love doing. And if
Mhm.
you have other things going on, sometimes it's better for your story to deal with the other things
Mhm.
so that you can write with a clear headspace, so that you can write in a manner that is reflective and isn't symbolic of whatever chaos is going on in your own life. So I think
Mhm.
that really when I wanted to give up, I
Mhm.
took that step back. I looked at it. I was like, why do I want to give up? What is it that
Mhm.
is influencing and creating this self doubt? And
Mhm.
then I figured out how to move past it in some way, shape, form, or fashion.
Mhm. Yes, that's normal to have a self doubt sometimes. Sometimes me as a teacher has this doubt, you know. That's why, there was also a time that I would have to give up my profession because I felt not worthy of this calling, shall I say, that I have right now.
Uh-huh.
Okay? Thank you so much for that advice that you have.
And can I say one
Okay.
more thing on that?
Yeah, sure thing.
Um,
Just go on.
so as I've mentioned on this before, is that I do have a podcast, the Ben's Bookshack podcast.
Mhm.
And for my beginning couple of episodes, I mostly
Mhm.
interviewed other writers that are in my age group. And I do
Mhm.
want to say that that sort of self doubt, that sort of feeling of, oh my gosh, I can't do this anymore. I'm not worth it. Those kinds of feelings of self doubt are so much more prevalent among younger writers than they are among older, more experienced writers. So if you guys either are young writers or know young writers or that kind of thing, just make sure that you're there for them, that you're supporting them. both, with your money, buy their books, read their Wattpad stories, follow them on Instagram, support them because their story is worth telling. So help them get past that hump. Because if you have more young writers who have this personal strength to continue to write, then 10, 15 years down the line, we're going to have a much better collection of books that are available to read than we would if all of those people had given up. So that's just my call out to the rest of the group.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, now before we do the last thing for our book talk today, let me ask the audience that we have here. Please, drop here your favorite book. Yes, that's in fact the next thing you have to do to qualify for, the particular book giveaways event. Yes. All right. What's your favorite book? Just drop it here. We would like to know. Okay. I would like to thank Sir Mark, Sir John Lloyd, and also Sir Rian for giving us, questions. Very interesting questions. In fact, we still have one thing to do, and then we will end this book talk or interview.
All right. Sounds good.
Yes. All right. So let's give them like about 1 minute.
Uh-huh.
If there's none at all, then we can wrap up. Yes. It's already late there in your place. Oh, according to Mark, any books from Patrick Ness, but specifically a Monster Calls. Oh no, don't remind me of a Monster Calls. I ugly cried there. Just a moment ago, or I mean just last few days, I watched the movie version of that one. Yes. Although I felt more on the books than the movie. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's the case for a lot of things is, the book always has a certain ability to stir emotions that the movie sometimes doesn't.
Yes, I agree with you. Because if you're just watching a movie, there's what we call, lack of, shall I say, connection. Unlike when you read a book, you could connect. It's more personalized.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I also find that when watching a movie, you can sometimes end up going on your phone or sort of having the movie be in the background. You're watching the movie as you're doing dishes or cooking
I
food or
agree.
something like that. Whereas when you're reading a book, you really need to have your full attention on it. And that attention creates the connection, and that connection creates the emotion.
Okay, but my target is Monsters of Men from your giveaway, but I'm not qualified. You're qualified, of course. But you've read already Monsters of Men. We badly read that, remember? Mark? Okay. By the way, I am currently reading Burn by Patrick Nessmar, and I love it so far. It's quite different from the books that he already published, like A Monster Calls, Release, and what was the book? I forgot. A Chaos Walking. Yes. It's different. It's a different flavor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How about the others? I would like to know of your favorite book or the book that you're reading right now. Yes. Yeah, I just need that to complete my collection. All right, all right, all right. Is that one way of telling me that I'm gonna give you the book already? But anyway, all right. Hmm? Okay, it looks like there's no one who's gonna, comment anymore. Now, this is the last thing that we'll have to do. Um, it's time to promote your books. I'm going to give you like about 2 minutes to do that. Promote your books.
All right, sounds good. So, Shattered Lion, Volume 1 and Volume 2 tell are thriller books that take place from the perspective of a soccer player named Jan van Rijn. He hails from the Netherlands, and when he is visiting his older sister Anya in California, where she lives, to play a soccer match,
Mhm.
things very quickly turn on their head with her sudden and violent kidnapping by a sinister organization known only as the Society.
Mhm.
And so Jan needs to meet up with people who are part of this seedy underbelly of the world, this world that's teeming with espionage and intrigue, lies. And, he meets his allies, but he also meets enemies. He's not sure who he can trust. And so he is recruited to take part in a mission that could either doom the world and his sister or save them both. And
Mhm.
so that's volume one. Volume two sort of moves along from the initial villain of volume one into a new main villain for volume two. It follows many of the same characters, except it's a little bit of a slower story. It takes place across the wilds of Siberia. He is spending a lot of time trying to find himself, trying to cope with the horrific things that he witnessed and experienced in volume one, and trying to really find his place, find out where he's going, how he's going to get there, and how he's going to be able to use what little he has in order to save his sister and the world, even as it crumbles around him.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
so, as though that's like the general premise. Both books are, as I've said many times, available on my website, bensbookshack.com. And that is where you can buy the ebook. Both the ebooks for volume one and volume two are both $6. Print copies are $13.50. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, please check them out if you are interested in espionage and thrillers, in learning about or not learning about, but hearing about experiences with geopolitics and espionage and you know just action thrillers and that kind of thing. If that sort of thing intrigues you, if you like fast-paced books, then this is really for you. So,
Mhm.
Shattered Lion 1, Shattered
Mhm.
Lion 2.
Okay. So what are you waiting for, guys? Purchase it now.
All right. Oh, there are still follow-up questions. Would that be fine if you're going to answer the two follow-up questions here?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, there's one who asks you, how did you handle criticism?
So it depended on who it was from and how they
Mhm.
phrased it. If I think that most people are genuinely trying to be helpful. So I took it in and I was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I
Mhm.
analyzed, I looked at my book, I thought, is this criticism actually worthy of being taken seriously? If it was, then I'd, just make a note of it, say,
Mhm.
this is something to watch out for in the future. If it's
Mhm.
something that I thought, wasn't really a valid point that they made, then I'd be like, oh my gosh, thank you so much.
Mhm.
And then I'd move on and purposefully forget it. So
Mhm.
it depended on what the criticism was.
Okay. Another question by Miss Michelle Angela. Are you currently working on a new book?
Yes, I am. So I've totally transitioned genres. I am working on a fantasy novella, which is probably going to be part of a series of between either 5 or 7 books. I haven't decided yet. I'm hoping to get these traditionally published, so it's probably going to take a little bit longer to get them out there. But it is a fantasy novella. The current working title for the series is Leatherbound because it
Mhm.
revolves around the quote unquote MacGuffin is a series of books, and he has to
Mhm.
find this series of books in order to
Mhm.
advance the plot, basically. But and so that's sort of the impetus for the book. So I'm not sure if it'll stay that title, but Leatherbound is a series of fantasy novellas that I'm currently working on.
Mhm.
That's my current work in progress.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay, I might grab a copy of that if it's going to be published so soon. Okay, thank you so much for your time, Sir Ben Kushner. I really appreciate you for waking up late this night just to attend this, or I mean to have this book talk with me, Clark. Yes. All
Well,
right.
I really appreciated your questions and your
Mhm.
time and the opportunity to talk about my books and the power of storytelling
Yes,
with
of course,
someone
I
who's
will.
clearly passionate about the same things that I am.
Okay, I'm looking forward to your books. Okay, now to the audience who have just joined us. Yes, again, For you to qualify the book, it's important that you ask question, you share what I posted last night. Yes, I'm going to give you further notice. Yes, after 12 o'clock or 12 noon. Yes, I still have a lot of things to do, and I'll PM you or send you the message how you can win the book. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Sir Ben, for this event or for this particular interview. Okay, and also to the audience who supported us all throughout this conversation that we have. Okay, this is again Clark, and have a good day.